Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Well, hello, listeners, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Becky Auer, and I am your host today. I interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and innovators, and experts who have had the spotlight and success and are ready to share their knowledge with you. I am super psyched to have our guest here today. Her name's Ginny Altman, and she is a business exit advisor and a broker, and she's crazy passionate about helping other business owners to exit their business for the best possible price. And she got her master's that is, from Carnegie Mellon University, which is no small feat. And she's created the Exit Eagle, and I can't wait to hear more about that. So, Ginny, welcome to the show today.
Hey, Becky, thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, so listen, our listeners want to know everything about you and how you got to where you are today. So let's talk a little bit about, like, when you were younger. Looking back, did you have, any signs or clues that you had, the entrepreneur gene in your DNA?
Well, both of my parents were entrepreneurs, so it's no surprise that I had my first business when I was 5 years old, when I took cucumbers, onions, and tomatoes up and down the neighborhood in a red wagon and sold them for 10 cents or a cookie. So that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial life.
I like it how it's 10 cents or a cookie.
Sometimes two.
I think I would have been going, give me that double cookie instead of the dime. I guess it depends on how hungry you are at that point. Oh, my gosh.
Well, by the time I get done, I wouldn't be hungry. That was a lot of fun.
That's right. Oh, I bet. It is so interesting when I interview entrepreneurs and, how young people are kind of showing, that they want to be an entrepreneur. And I'm sure your parents, helped with that too. Showing you that there is possibility outside of having, a 9-to-5 job.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, my first job was doing bookkeeping for my mother in her ceramic business when I was 12. And that is what got me started in loving numbers and business combined together.
Wow. Well, I just reached not a milestone birthday, but a birthday in the 50-plus category, and I still don't like numbers or anything like that. So I'm always in awe of people that, like, that's their profession and that's what they like to do. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us about, before you became, a business broker, tell us about some of the jobs that you had. I mean, you talked about working for your mom, but take us from, after you were, tell us a little bit about your college and, for anybody listening that knows about Carnegie Mellon, I mean, that's impressive in and of itself, and then to get your master's from there. So take us about, take us from how you got in there and, you obviously loved it and stayed and got your master's, but from there, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, when I first graduated from college, I had exposure to being an entrepreneur, but I didn't have exposure to the big world sort of outside of Western Pennsylvania. But I was fortunate enough to, I had started my own computer company, and through that I got hired by Westinghouse to do programming for the Westinghouse Nuclear Fuels Division. And from there, someone referred me to a consulting business. And I remember saying to them, what does a consulting company do? And they said, well, they go into companies and tell them what to do. And I said, that sounds like a really stupid job. And I went for the job anyway, and that's what I did for the next 25 years. So it just goes to show. So I really was blessed with that. I ended up, sort of in my mid-20s at Ford Motor Company. And I had the opportunity to be a project manager under the direction of Dr. Deming, who invented total quality management, which became, operational excellence and Six Sigma. So that got me really fascinated with how you create change in organizations, how you measure change and how you use numbers to encourage performance, not punish it. So that project ended up lasting about 4 or 5 years. I ended up doing implementation through Ford of Europe for a period of time, lived in Europe there, and came back. And I ended up down in Washington, D.C., doing some work with government projects, but I wasn't as excited about that because it's harder to, get movement in those organizations.
Sure.
So from there, I ended up, actually, I took some time off and did some work for example, I was a wrangler at Faith Ranch. And I ended up down in South Carolina, where another consulting company got in touch with me to come and work with them, Kepner Trigo out of Princeton, New Jersey. And for them, I became, saturated in problem solving, decision making, project management, engineering the human performance system. All of those as tools to create change and eventually, turn around, in the Fortune 500 environment. So that, actually, it was after that I did my master's at Carnegie Mellon. I had done a project at Corning where it was the first time that the value of the business was used to measure success. Goldman Sachs was the, business intermediary. They would come in once a month and measure the increase in value that we had or had not achieved. In the end, we doubled the sell price of the Corning Consumer Products division from 345 to like 750 million, something like that, over a 2.5-year period. And that's really what planted the seeds. Yeah, that was really killer. That is what planted the seeds because that's where I was exposed to business valuations, but I didn't know how to do them. I just knew how to use it to measure progress. But then at Carnegie Mellon, I was exposed to, of course, lots of math, Becky. I'm sure you'd love that.
Yeah.
But I was also exposed to business intermediaries and the term I'm trying to think, investment. A lot of investment people came in and taught classes as adjunct professors. So I learned a lot about the whole sort of arena of selling businesses. And that's really what led to the foundation for wanting to start the business exit advisory and business brokerage.
Well, I love what you said, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate that you said how you learned that, I think I have this right, that you learned that numbers can encourage and not punish people. You have to look at the right numbers, and I love that. Did I say that right?
You did. I would add to that, you have to present the numbers to them in a way that helps them think differently instead of just go like, oh my gosh, we failed again. So it's actually a lot of fun.
I would think it would be a lot of fun. Hey, I think I'd be jumping for joy if you were, talking and saying, hey, over the last 2 years, we went from, 340 to, $700 million. I mean, that's a pretty good, return on investment, I'd say.
That is. So that was, a team of us. It wasn't, I wish I could say it was just me, but, it was a fascinating experience. I just, got to learn every single, nook and cranny of the business, and, it was just awesome.
Yes. Yeah, no, that would be. Well, I know just in talking with you before this interview, that you've worked for some of the biggest name businesses out there, share a couple more because it's impressive.
Well, I can talk about, there's kind of a lot of them. One of the ones that I get a kick out of is Darden Restaurants, which is Red Lobster and the Olive one. But
Olive Garden, I know.
Yeah.
Love garden restaurants. Yep.
Yeah. So that was another interesting. I'm always bringing up numbers. I can't help it. But I got to go down and work with Darden, and it was the first time that we started really clocking how long it should take a waiter or waitress to get a table served, cleared, and the next category in, and measuring the desserts they sold and the drinks they sold, and really tracking all of that for these poor guys so that they'd have to live up to that. So that was kind of interesting. I had never thought, I had worked as a waitress when I was in high school, but I never thought of it as a, like manufacturing. You'd use a lot of numbers, but also even in a restaurant, numbers can really drive performance.
Yes.
Procter Gamble, that was one of the best companies I worked with. They have an amazing system in place to really support people in doing excellent work, and they really promote a lot from within. So it was exciting to be involved with their executive teams and doing off-sites and things like that to put plans together for taking divisions to the next level of technology and performance. HUD is a fun one. When I worked with HUD, that was just when computers were starting to come really into use. And prior to this project, they couldn't put together, so I would say I own businesses, I own rental properties. I have 20 units in my building, and then we would put an agreement together on how much they would pay me for the people that I had in there. But that side didn't talk to the side that actually paid. So I could send you a bill that said I had 40 units and you would pay it.
Wow.
So there were literally millions of dollars being drained out of the housing and urban development system by people who were cheating. And it turned out when we put all this together, they had to fire the guy who was in charge of HUD because he was one of the worst perpetrators in New York City.
Oh my gosh.
He got fired.
So you were the hammer. You were the hammer, or one of the hammers, to say, there's all these millions of dollars disappearing too.
Yeah. Hey, look at these. Here, I say it again. Look at these numbers. Isn't that funny how they don't quite work? So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's
my
great.
mom was like, please go work with other government agencies and get more money saved for us taxpayers. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. So all of that number background then, and this consultant management stuff that you did, is that what led you to start Exit Eagle then?
Well, I ended up coming home at some point. I traveled 100% for like 20 years, and there just came a time when it was like, okay, it's time to go back home. So I came back to Western PA, and I worked with the .coms until all the .coms went bust after 9/11. And then I worked with a nonprofit agency, a pretty big one, that had lost half their budget. They had a $38 million budget, and it went down to $19 million kind of overnight after 9/11. So we had to restructure how we delivered services and also find new ways to bring money in. And at that point, my dad had retired, and my sister had had the business for a few years. And my parents called me and said, hey, how would you like to come out and work for the family business? And so I did. I was a little surprised when I got there to see what had happened, because after my dad left, a manager was hired to come in and manage the business. And he wanted to buy the business, but my sister wanted to keep the business for my nephew. So he left after 2 years with half of the clients. Some of them who'd been our clients for more than, 20 years.
Wow.
So that really slaughtered revenues. And then when he left, they hired another operations manager, business manager, whatever. And he was just a lazy. he sat in the office and he did everything but work on the business. So by the time I got there, we were down to like a third of revenues from when my dad had left. So
wow.
It was a huge, vast, fast, electric lesson in what it's like to be the one responsible for a turnaround instead of telling someone else how to do it.
You bet.
It's a completely different picture. And my motivation for doing it was so that my nephew could have the business, but he didn't want the business. He kept saying, I don't want the business, Aunt Jenny. And I kept saying, you just wait. You will. You will. He was like, no, I won't. After 4 years, I'm like, wow. You really don't want this business, do you? He's like, no, I don't. And then he looked at me and he said, you don't want it either, do you? And I'm like, no, I don't. And then he said those words I love to hear. So, what are you going to do about it, Aunt Jenny? It's like, oh, shoot, rather.
When your family calls you out, yeah.
Yeah, what am I going to do? So,
yeah, what am I going to do? And don't you love, I got to stop you because I know the people listening, like if anyone has worked with their family before, like it's not an easy thing because everybody's got their big opinion, as I always like to say. And, you're just there trying to, keep the business afloat and, operating. So, for anybody that has a family business, they got to be giving you some kudos for stepping into that and then trying to make it work.
Oh my gosh, I was completely surprised by how complex it is to manage not just the relationships with family, but with employees. Like we had employees who'd been there 22 and 25 years, and they were so committed to my father. To transition that commitment was nearly impossible. We got there, but I also ended up getting the business sold, which was really difficult. This was 2006, 2007. We hadn't had Shark Tank, so not everybody knew you could even sell a business. I went to my accountant, my attorney, and they were like, go into Pittsburgh. I went into the investment bankers in Pittsburgh, and they were like, what are your revenues? And I told them, and they laughed me out of the office. They're like, we don't even talk to people unless they have 30 million. Well, if we'd had 30 million in revenues, I wouldn't care if we'd sold it.
Right,
so,
and you wouldn't be selling it because you were making enough money back then to support everybody and everything.
Right, exactly. So the investment bankers love the big guys. I mean, they've changed their tune since the economy crashed, but
of course,
I just got this passion to really help the not so big guys.
Yeah.
Good, solid business people who had employed people, who had taken care of customers, helped the American economy. Now it's time to leave, and what do? And that's where I wanted to get in and work.
Yeah.
So that started out as Altman Business Solutions in 2008. And then in, I think 2 years ago, I renamed it the Exit Eagle.
Yeah. Well, it's great because you do help families and you help, families with businesses and second generation and third generation to sell the business when it can really be, hard and awkward, just like you said. So, so I give you a lot of credit for doing it. And I'm sure that the people that you've helped, thus far, are thrilled with, your services, but getting into that, right? Deciding that I think is a big decision and, that there's many challenges that come with that. Can you talk about the challenges a little bit?
I can talk about the challenges a little bit. The number one challenge, I think the number one most important thing that I've learned is, it probably won't surprise you to know that I love doing business valuations because they are number-based, but they are not really number-driven. That is a problem sometimes. And I'll tie this back into some examples, Becky, but it's really important because if you do a straight numeric calculation for a business valuation, it's not going to give you a true picture of what your business is worth. it gives you an idea of an averaged out business with no special unique characteristics is worth. So the most important lesson I learned, this is so critical. And if your broker doesn't do this, go find another one. I get to know my clients' businesses inside, outside, backwards, and forwards. Because first of all, I want to put together a compelling sales and marketing package, which you should really appreciate. Once, you get that person in there, you want to be able to give them what they need to see why they should write a check, a big check for that business. You want to be able to clearly demonstrate to them how they are going to get a solid return on investment and maybe even a crazy good one, if they do just a few things differently than what the current owners do. So that's really where the turnaround part comes into play in my, in the exit planning side of the business, where we work very hard to find your unique value proposition so that you can get the best possible sell price. And also so we can then target the best type of buyer to look for who would want to capitalize on the unique opportunities that your business presents. So I don't take a lot of listings. I take a few listings and then I really work them. And part of that stems from when I had the ownership of Altman Telecommunications, I had paid for when I decided to sell, I hired someone to do an accountant to do a business valuation for me, and they charged like $9,000 and sent me this 55-page document that had a whole bunch of, I'd like done my master's at Carnegie Mellon with a lot of financial analysis stuff, and I really could only understand one number in there, and that was how much the business was worth, and I thought they were completely wrong. And when I called the accountant, she couldn't explain what it was, because all she'd done was entered some numbers in a computer software package.
Right.
So that made me decide to really learn how to do it all, sort of like bare knuckles, my own spreadsheets, my own going out and doing my own research, using, hiring database companies so that I have good data to access, and really pulling all that into the valuation. If you get that part right, you do a good job selling the business. And I learned that from sort of my third business back in 2008. Oh my gosh. I was so ill prepared. I was so excited about getting that business. It was a manufacturing business, a fairly good sized one, 18 million in revenues. I mean, some people might not think that's a lot, but to me, that's a lot. And,
right. You bet.
Yeah. So I was very excited about that. And I did, I had gotten certification as a business valuation, expert through the International Business Brokers Association, but this was kind of like my third valuation, and I did it exactly according to the book. I followed every single step, and I came up with this awesome value. And like the owners were so excited. I was excited, and I started marketing, and I pulled in, I think I went through like 40. There's a swear word wants to come out of my mouth right now, but I'm not going to. 40 something potential buyers, all who came in and said, you know what? If they're lucky, I'll take this business off their hands for nothing.
Wow.
Yes. Because there were when you do the standard valuation, it just looks at, okay, here's your revenues, here's your expenses. It doesn't look at what it's going to take to keep that business going. So, the equipment hadn't been replaced literally for 52 years.
Wow.
Then, I did not know to ask the question about, are there any environmental issues? And of course, they were loaded, and that was going to take about another, 40,000 up to 65,000 to resolve those issues. So by the time you put all that together and brought it up to date, it would cost more to do that than it would to start fresh.
Wow.
So that was like the learning platform that really dived me in. Now I'll give you a recent one that we're still working on the closing, which is the more positive side. It's a machine shop, and it's a suite. I mean, you know, sometimes in your business life, you get something where you just like, this is sweet. I cannot believe I actually got this. It's so nice. And that's how this machine shop was, because it was so well run by two brothers, which is another challenge, but we won't go into that right now. So,
okay.
I mean, working with two brothers when you're trying to exit and getting them to agree on a bunch of stuff can be a challenge, but that's okay. We work through it. So they had evaluation done, and the business was valued at $1.5 million. It was a cap valuation, and that's typically what you use to value real estate. The real estate involved in this transaction was worth $1.5 million. Not, that didn't even include the business. The business had a 25% profit margin, and these owners owned it for 28 years. They were third generation owners. They had a history going back 40 and 50 years from the top tier. In other words, the best, type of clients to have in their industry. They consistently made money. They had the opportunity to make more, but chose not to because they didn't want to do more work. They just wanted to be able to go home at 4:00 in the afternoon. They had employees that were in their 30s and 40s who were going to be sticking around for another 20 or 30 years. And just having employees in a manufacturing environment that are going to stay, they're tested, tried, and true, is incredible value.
Yes.
So, and there were a few other features that really set this machine shop above almost, 80%. And so in the end, we were able to get where you would normally get sort of like 3 or 4 multiplier of EBITDA, which is, I know, a technical phrase, but we're actually getting a 7 times multiple. So that means the business is actually going to sell for $4.5 million plus a bit instead of 1.5. And that's because, amazing. Doing straight EBITDA would have been 3. So that's because of that I'm sorry, keep interrupting you, but because of that manufacturing business, because I learned, like, don't just do the calculation, like that's a starting point, not an end point. Get to know that business, see what the benefits are, learn the industry so that you know where it's going and what you can capitalize on when you're presenting to potential investors, and know when it's time to quit. So sometimes I have to tell clients, let's come up with an alternative plan. Like a commercial roofing company I worked with in Connecticut, where, like the manufacturing company, he had not improved the business. He hadn't changed technology. He hadn't, really provided advanced training for his employees. To really get it to the point where he could get a good price for it would have taken $1.5 million. And he was just like, and 3 years. He's like, I don't want to do that. I have enough money in the bank. And I'm like, well, then let's come up with a different alternative on how you want to spin out of this business. And so that's what we did. So that's a long answer to your question, Becky.
Yeah, well, look, I appreciate it because I have started 3 businesses, right? And then when you go to sell them, it is a different process. So I appreciate, like, somebody like yourself who, comes prepared, first of all, right, with, after you gather the numbers and can prepare a statement or evaluation where, that it makes sense and you have the reasons behind it. And it's so interesting to me, like the roofer, who could have gotten more money, but he was ready to exit now, not in 3 years, and he didn't want to do anything to improve the business. And, some people are just at that point, but when those are the opportunities, right? I mean, that's how I always look at them as it's a perfect business if you, A, are interested in that industry, but then B, can take it over and do either what you suggest or, the plan that's laid out ahead to improve that business. I mean, that's always the opportunity. So it's just interesting when people go to exit or are planning their exit, which I think is probably, sounds like anyway, where you are the best, is helping them plan their exit, whether that's next month or I would think if they came to you before that, and, they had a 5-year range, then you could really help them increase that business and then get just like you say, 4, 5, 6, 7 time multiple sometimes if they follow your plan. Am I saying all of that correct?
You're saying it, but honestly, I mean, a 3-year lead time would be like awesome. 5 years, I mean, I can't even imagine. That would be like winning, the lottery 2 days in a row. So,
right.
You're absolutely right. When we have the opportunity to work on the business a little, sometimes it takes a little, sometimes it depends. Like where I start now is I partner with a financial planner because if you're planning your retirement and this is it, this is your last shot at getting enough money to retire in the manner that you want to retire, then we have to do a really good job. And there you must have more than a month, a minimum of a year, I would say. Yeah. But 3 years would be a really excellent starting point.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I think most business owners, when they're ready, but if they would just think about it or, I always tell my clients and my members that are in my group, think about your exit and then kind of plan your life and your business around what that exit looks like. And if people would actually do that, how much easier it would be for them and for someone like yourself who represents them in the business, to get a big number at the end where now, don't you think that most people go willy-nilly and just think, oh, okay, maybe in a few more years I'll retire, but they never think, oh, what could I do now to get the business ready for sale? And I think that's where you really can help them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And sometimes it's as simple as an embroidery business that's working out of their basement. I mean, if you want to, on a scale of 1 to 10, they were like a 9 in terms of attractiveness for a buyer, except for the fact they were in the basement of their house, which was in the country. And their clients loved going there because when they would go, they would get tea, they'd get to sit on the porch, so the concern about transitioning customers to new owners plus a new location was heavy. So we took a couple of years to get them moved, to bring the buyer in, and really just manage that transition over a 2-year period very tightly to get the customers in place. And that really accelerated the actual sell price. Another company I worked with in Connecticut, a different company, was oil delivery, HVAC, and plumbing. They actually already had a buyer. This was for a huge number. But the buyer wouldn't buy it until they had a receivables. In other words, they had a lot of people who owed them money over a 3 to 4 year period that was equivalent to almost 40% of annual revenues. And so the buyer said, once you get that fixed, we'll buy. And they had brought 3 people in to try to fix that problem. And I ran into the owner at an SBDC, Small Business Development Center meeting. And he was telling me about it. And I'm like, well, I could fix that for you. And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yes. And so he hired me. Long story short, he had actually gotten a business from his father about 6 years previous, and it was only an oil delivery. He decided to bring in HVAC and plumbing. His father had left the business suddenly. He ran off to France to have a relationship with a ballerina, of all things.
Wow. And there we go. Yeah.
Yes. So the son had been working on Wall Street, and he came down. Well, he wanted something a little bit more impressive than an oil, delivery. And he came up with a brilliant strategy of being able to service the whole house, because there were a lot of houses rich people owned who only were there for a week out of the year. So they could take care of all the HVAC, getting it ready for summer or winter, opening it for summer. They could call and say, we need it open, all of that. But what he didn't know is how to integrate the businesses together. So what happened was he had somebody ordering parts for the HVAC and plumbing. They'd go out to do a job and they'd say, we need a part, and they'd come back and they'd get this person who, was a scheduler for the oil business, but didn't like people. So was down in the basement, literally like a mole. And, she'd order the part and put it on the shelf. Well, there wasn't a system in place to track the, service agreements, the service calls rather. So, this sounds incredible that a multi-million dollar company could let something like that fall through, but they did. And I just discovered it by calling people. Like Henry Kissinger was one of the people, I didn't get to talk to him, but he owned one of the houses.
Wow.
And I would ask, and Meryl Streep was another one. I would ask, I noticed you haven't paid this bill. Can you tell me what we need to do that would make you want to pay it? And they said, finish the job. I'm like, finish the job? And they were like, yes, you came, you said you need a part, and you never came back. I'm
wow.
like, really? Yes. So, after I heard 4 or 5 of those, I went to the owner, and the owner wasn't like your greatest customer service person. And he's like, and he said, you can fix this if you want. And I'm like, well, I will fix it if you want to sell the business. He's like, well, yes, I do. So, I fixed it. I worked with the service manager who was new to being a service manager, and he was managing 3 different companies. It's just the whole situation was kind of
crazy.
Interesting. Yes, crazy. Yes. That's the word, crazy. Thank you. So we put a new system in place to schedule and track orders. We retired the lady that was the mole in the basement, and we gave somebody else the job of following up on service orders and ordering parts. And we put somebody in place who was truly a proactive customer service person and calling after each job. It sounds like a lot, but, a lot of their jobs were huge. People would have plumbing or, like a new air conditioning system put into a multi-million-dollar house. They didn't want it to show. Those jobs were big money. So yes. Follow up on every job. Follow up with every oil delivery customer 3 times during the delivery season. We had automated delivery. They didn't call in. We anticipated and then delivered. So we didn't really have to talk to them. And they didn't until we put in place somebody whose job it was. Got that turned around. It took 2 years, and the company that was buying them actually paid more money for the business once those things were fixed than what they had originally talked about. So that's an example.
Fixed it all.
Yeah. So I wasn't involved in the sale, just in increasing the value of the business prior to the actual sale event.
Wow.
Thanks for asking me about that.
It sounds like you have so much, honestly, anybody would be lucky to work with you because you have all the front end experience, right? Of like how to see it and then how to fix it if there's something wrong. And you have the experience on the back end of being a business broker and an exit planner, for lack of a better term, on how to sell it. And if anybody gives you any amount of time, to kind of meld those two things together, they'll get more money for when they sell their business. So any listeners out there today, if you want help or are thinking about, maybe you want to have a sale in, a few years, contact Ginny because she can get you set up where you're going to get more money. That's incredible. And I know part of that's that Carnegie Mellon learning right there.
I'll give them credit too.
Yeah, right. I'm always so impressed with that. Of course, living in Pittsburgh. And, I know that the people going through there, it's not easy to get in and it's not easy to get out. So I love that. But what I love more and what I, love sharing with our listeners is, the success that you're having and have had for these business owners, because hopefully you only sell a business, once, maybe twice in your lifetime. So you don't know what you don't know. And, that's why I do interviews like this with experts who, are out there and doing it. And it's just been eye-opening to me to be reminded that, yeah, when people get into business, they always forget, what that exit looks like. But if you can plan ahead just a few years, how much better, you're going to do. Well, bring me up to date, Ginny, what's it like being you today? What do you do most of your days? And tell me about, your current business and the types of people that you help and, that type of thing.
Well, I'm focusing on machine shops and trades right now. I just got a restaurant service, sort of trades service business. So restaurants were actually their clientele. We got that sold February 12th we closed, which was literally almost 2 weeks prior to COVID-19 shutdown.
Yeah.
So that is one seller who loves me, because if we had had it 3 weeks later, he'd never get the business sold.
That's right.
I'm sorry for the buyer. But for the seller, it was great. So that is one example. And I've told you about the machine shop, and that is currently where I am.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not true. I'm working with another manufacturing business. I can't believe I forgot this. And this manufacturing business is interesting because they have a 35% profit margin, but it's a false profit margin because a lot of that is he doesn't spend money on, it's kind of like the roofing guy. He doesn't spend money on keeping up to date with the business, and he doesn't present an appealing visual. That the industry used to be that people just came to you, but the competitive environment has changed where it's actually become retail, not just manufacturing with a side shop that people came in and purchased. It's actually moving into the retail environment now. So we have to really, he didn't even have Wi-Fi. I'm telling you, that's where he was. So
wow.
In order for us to capture the value of the huge profit margin, we actually have to do a lot of work in updating the business. We have to get a couple different employees in there and get them settled. So it'll probably be a year, maybe two. And then what I'm doing on this side with that is I've started a nonprofit called Dovetail Apprenticeships. And the reason I started this is because we have what they're calling a tsunami of boomer business owners who are going to be exiting their businesses over the next 10 years. That means business owners who are 60 to 70 years old now. They're going to exit whether they like it or not, and they can either exit in a prepared way or they can just end up getting whatever they can get out of their business. And most of those business owners, those 65%, need the sale of the business to fund their retirement. So it's really not a joke that they need to prepare. The other problem is who's going to buy it. So there's a lot of untapped experience, a lot of untapped potential in sort of the disadvantaged, environments of the United States. And one example is people coming out of foster care who maybe didn't have anybody who, like, you know, I was fortunate. I had parents at 5 years old, you know, let me use a Little Red Wagon, and then Mom hired me to do the bookkeeping, and then, you know, I got to work, and my dad, just all that kind of support and encouragement.
Yes.
And exposure, and pure exposure. So there's a lot of gifted young people out there who don't get the opportunity to use that gift. And so this organization is all about finding them and training them to become the next small business owners so that we can keep that a backbone of our economy going. That's actually taking up a lot of my time right now.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And it's so needed. And it just sounds like you're the perfect person to do that. So congratulations. I'm sure all our listeners are impressed with that, as well as your extensive background. And I just have to share before we wrap things up, one of the things that of course, I creep on you on Facebook from time to time, and you just completed something that I'm so impressed with. Will you just do a quick share on what that is?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, I'll just preface it by saying when I was in my 30s, I dated a guy who was the number 2 triathlon athlete in his age category in Australia. And I always wanted to do a triathlon, but I was so far removed from him, I thought that will never happen. And lo and behold, last year I found a triathlon group for women of a certain age and above. Having just reached a certain age, I was able to join. So I actually trained and was able to, you know, Susan Waldrop, she's amazing, and actually completed my first triathlon. Now, it wasn't an Ironman triathlon like my athletic friend, but it was a triathlon. We did, oh gosh, I forget the numbers now, but it, like 700, like the equivalent of 7.5 football fields of swimming, and then biked, I think it was 15 miles, and then run, about 3.5 miles. Any one of those are kind of approachable, but doing them all together, that really was a challenge. And I have to say, I am delighted that I can finally say I am a triathlete.
Oh my gosh. I'm so impressed with that, because I have always wanted to do that and have never found like the group that you did. But hey, it is impressive. Mostly at, as our increasing ages just continue to go up. But congratulations on that. But, and look, all your business experience and success, kudos to you. It's always tougher for an entrepreneur to, just keep going and keep finding your way. And it certainly sounds like you have done that, and helping the people in manufacturing and machine shops and things like that, that they can take a step back with a sigh of relief and, be grateful that they have found somebody like you. So I just want to thank you for, jumping on and talking with us today and giving our listeners, all of your background. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners the best way to find you or to get in touch with you. Can you share that with us?
I am always happy to give a free consultation when somebody is starting their journey or just, thinking about what do I need to do? What do I need to think about? What is the process for selling a business? So if you would like to have a free consultation, I always say 15 minutes, but it never is only 15 minutes. You can jump onto my website, which is www.theexiteagle, exit, E-X-I-T, eagle, EAGLE.com. And on there, you can find some tabs to, or whatever they're called, that you click to schedule an appointment for a free consultation. And that there is no obligation with that. I'm really just happy to talk to anyone about it. I just want everybody to have an opportunity to exit in a way that surprises and delights their family. But if they don't want to do that, they can also call me or text me on my phone, which is 412-514-1050. And again, that's 412-514-1050. I'm always happy to respond to a phone call or a text message. And then, of course, finally, they can also email me, virginia.altman@theexiteagle.com. And Altman is spelled A as in Apple, L-T-M-A-N. So that's virginia.altman@theexiteagle.com. Please call. I would love to help.
That's great. And I'm sure that you will get calls from this because people need help and they don't know where to turn, and somebody that's trustworthy and that, has your kind of background, and is affordable to the small business owner. So anybody listening, I would say reach out to Ginny. She's an amazing person and has amazing knowledge and loves numbers. So if you're one of those people that doesn't love numbers, reach out to Ginny. Ginny, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your expertise and your experience today. So that's going to be it for today. Until next time, this is Becky Auer. I'm your host, and I can't wait to see you in the spotlight.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.